The power behind your calling is not you. You know, if we're honest, I think most of us go many moments, many days, many hours, sometimes even weeks without acknowledging that God is the one who wakes us up in the morning. He's the one who is in control. He's the one who's in the heavens, Psalm 115:3, and does whatever he pleases. He's the one who does all those things. And so for him, this is exactly what it's about. And so God here in Galatians 2:8, as we've been going through this verse by verse study of the book of Galatians, literally. And hi, my name is Darren, by the way. I help you understand the Bible with clarity, courage, and confidence. Says this, Galatians 2:8, for God, who worked through Peter for his apostolic ministry to the circumcised, worked also through me, that is Paul, for mine to the Gentiles. The big idea today is that the same God who calls you is the same God who empowers you. And you know, we've seen this a lot in this whole episode with Peter and Paul, that God is working through those who are willing to be worked through. Yes, it's all his power. Yes, it's all his calling. Yes, it's all God's work. But at the end of the day, it is God who does it. And 3 short points here. First, I want you to know that God supplies the power. God supplies the power. For he who worked through Peter. Friends, just the fact that God works through us is an amazing miracle. There is a fancy Latin word which is aseity, or aseity, A-S-E-I-T-Y, which basically is an attribute that only God has. It's to put it another way, it's God's self-sufficiency. God does not need us. He is not an idol, Paul said in Acts 17, like others, that needs to, that he needed anything from us. A lot of people walk around thinking, well, if God didn't have me, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Well, he sure started out okay, didn't he? In the beginning, God said, and it was, and so it began. But what we're seeing here as Peter is being described and Paul is being described is that God supplies the power. John 15:5, Jesus famously said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So ministry runs on his strength and not ours. It's not our strategies, our personnel. You know, I've heard numerous times through the years, if we could just get that, if God could just save this famous person or this sports figure or this local celebrity or this business person or whatever it is, some person of persona, prominence, and power, then our church would take off, or you know, this, that, or the other. Friends, we have to remember the fundamentals is that God supplies the power. The one who worked through Peter is the same one who worked through Paul to go to the Gentiles. Second thing is that this reminds us, secondly, this verse in Galatians 2:8, that we have different roles but the same Spirit. We have different roles but the same Spirit. It's exactly what Paul was talking about, 1 Corinthians 11 and 12, where he was describing, can the foot say to the hand, I don't need you, or the nose say to the ear, and other examples. Peter's mission was very distinct. Certainly, he shared with anyone about Jesus, but specifically, he was called to the Jews. He was a Jew. He grew up around the culture and knew it. And so all of his fishing business, everything was right there. Your mission is distinct. God doesn't call you except to the people he calls you to. It may be the same city, maybe the same company, maybe the same family. But God has a distinct mission for you. There is some individualness to God's calling. He doesn't save families. He saves individuals and families. And so that's just something we need to remember. But the source is shared. Again, 1 Corinthians 3 tells us that Paul watered, Apollos watered, Paul planted, but God gave the growth. And so that is the truth of the matter, is that it's different roles, but the same Spirit. Are you trusting? Is there something we could pray for in this regard for you? Are you trusting that God can use another church? God can use another individual. God can use another whatever. And so what you need to know is that God is able, through different roles, to use his same Spirit. And aren't you grateful for that? Last thing is this, and I think it is a testimony to how God works, is that weakness magnifies Jesus. Weakness magnifies Jesus. And so Paul is certainly not in the inner circle, so to speak, with the early church. He's worked his way there, but he's still considered an outsider. Yeah, he was definitely an insider. Philippians 3, his goal was to be prominent in the early Judaistic movement. But here we see that weakness magnifies Jesus. Is that where he may not have had advantage over some of the early church things? His limitations were invitations for God's glory. Your limitations are invitations for God's glory. And again, this is why Paul said in 2 Corinthians 4:7 that we have treasures in jars of clay. In other words, these fragile bodies, these fragile ministries, these fragile things of life that we count as our own are things that God can use to glorify his name. You can step boldly in faith today, knowing that when God is the one working through you, he is the one who supplies the power, he's the one who gives you a distinct role with the same Spirit, and he's the one that weakness magnifies Jesus through. So, question today, are you relying on your ability, or you're trusting in God's power to work through you? Guys, that's all I got today. Galatians 2:8. I just want you to know, if you're new, just throw in tips, TIPS, into the chat below, and I will be glad to send you some Bible study tips. But also, I want you to know that Jesus loves you.